sort of measured upon, right?
Yeah, I
and
mean, I have a
assessed.
bit of beef with this a little bit.
Brief.
Yeah, just because security annoys me in the sense of...
Just security. Like,
Well,
don't
it-
lock your doors.
It
Security is
annoys me.
annoying.
It doesn't... Sorry, let me just rephrase. Security doesn't annoy me just generally. Lock all your doors, I'm coming for you.
Don't lock your
No one
doors.
can stop me. Hello, welcome to Cloud Unplugged. This is season 2, episode 4, and I'm Jon Shanks.
And I'm Jay Keshur.
And today we are mixing it up a little bit because we went a bit down the landing zone security rabbit hole for a little while. Still on that, guise of obviously cloud delivery, assuming you have a landing zone and those things, or assuming that you've got some level of scale. I think we're kind of still talking about companies like mid-sized businesses or enterprises. A question for you, Mr. Keshur. Where were you? I'm joking. Do you think it's possible, given some of the decisions we've been making in the podcast, because some of the there's a lot of complexity around this stuff. Obviously, I remember in previous episodes saying, well, is it complex to somebody that understands it? And you've got the answers. Maybe not as much, but for a business, there's a lot of decisions that need to be made, be it through somebody or a team or whatever. Because of that, do you think it's possible for a business to stay lean and deliver in the cloud successfully and support all the different business units accordingly?
Yeah, good question. I think there's probably a lot to unpack there, and I'm going to maybe slightly answer a different question, which
it's a completely different question.
Which is related, which is, how does a business stay lean? Because obviously, I mean, the answer to can you stay lean? Yes, of course you are. Of course you can.
All right, so you can stay lean even though it's complicated.
Even though it's complicated, you can stay lean because it's up to you how much responsibility to take on and how much you're trying to solve problems that have already been solved, right? Like, you're moving to the cloud, so already you're staying lean by getting rid of a massive part of your organization that dealt with physical infrastructure, as an example. So is it possible to do application delivery in the cloud in a lean way? Yes. Now, how does an enterprise or a small to medium business try to do that? Well, it's kind of about the services that they're using in cloud and how they use those services, and the knowledge that they have within the teams.
So landing zone, just as an example, we spoke about a lot of stuff in there, and identity, and then roles, and which is like authorization stuff, and then CI, and like, should CI be now we're doing infrastructure as code, what's the access for that thing? And actually then maybe don't use the SaaS unless it's got runners that could be local, or that the architecture of the CI systems are designed well, and obviously for better security posture, and hub and spoke for networking, and isolated cloud accounts for the teams and environments, and blah, blah, blah. So there's a lot of stuff,
a lot of buzzwords,
a lot of stuff, right? A lot of knowledge, obviously, that we've got over the years because we've been doing it for so long. But knowing all of those things, it doesn't sound like it is easy.
Simple.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like there is. It's very easy to stay lean based on those things.
So I get your, how you create a landing zone. Like, landing zones are a known quantity nowadays, right? You have a lot of companies that still will charge you hundreds of thousands, if not millions of pounds, to get you to having a landing zone and building it in the right way. But you also have, on the flip side of it, you also have like organizations that are building those things as
all the time,
reusable products that can just give you it, instead of building
True.
something custom every single time. And are you staying lean in your costs by choosing one of the other? Of course you are. Like, a decision there is pretty much a no-brainer. You're getting the same outcome. It's a landing zone. You're making it really easy for a team that you're onboarding in, using best practice, isolated accounts, security, all of that kind of stuff. Now it's the next bit of right, I've got a landing zone. How am I delivering my applications? What is that golden path for secure application delivery, and how much of that can I outsource, insource? How much knowledge do I need to have around that space to do it well? And some of that is, I guess, based on what decisions you're making for the organization. Like, are you allowing the development teams the full the full freedom of choice to do absolutely everything they want to do, in which case, you're going to end up building something that's potentially unmanageable because you're trying to control all of the different ways of doing those things. But if you're being really strict on how, say, making it so that they're only delivering containers, and you're going to orchestrate those containers in a way, then you've confined how they're operating, and you've put all of the controls in the right place. Now, what does that mean? How are you going to get like a Kubernetes clusters or something like that, or something where they can deploy and get environments? That's the question.
Yeah.
What is the thing that's creating them environments where they can deploy something into?
I guess, though, just to pull on what you've said, and this is going to make us sound really biased, so I have to be kind of careful because that isn't the point of the podcast. But this is just me being sincere about it, actually. The most expensive things most of the time, not always, are usually people.
Yeah.
And people are time, and people plus time equals money.
Yeah.
Right? So I guess either you're outsourcing, and then the money could be higher because it's a service and you're outsourcing that service, and there'll be lots to the management of the service, plus how they're managing the updates for you, and then the skills that they have. So the price point might be way higher because of that. Obviously, not necessarily a bad thing because you might not be able to have it in-house. But then there are things that are a bit more commoditized, like you were saying. There are products maybe, or the solutions off the peg when something's quite specific, right? And bit more general purpose, like you were saying, a landing zone. I mean, we've kind of gone through this ourselves. You can kind of make a lot of informed decisions. Doesn't mean it will be 100% right for everyone. There's always going to be edge cases.
Yeah.
And lots of gotchas of like, X, Y, and Z. So, I suppose the real question is, though, how... It sounds like the first thing to do is probably work out whether you've got a lot of custom requirements or whether you're more general purpose, and whether those custom requirements are going to manipulate the general purpose ones in a way that makes everybody succumb to the lack of commodity in it now.
Yeah.
Or whether you can decompartmentalize, can't speak, those two things separately, so you can say actually 85% of the business isn't unique.
Yeah.
Just this bit is. We'll treat that separately, and that becomes a separate cost.
It's funny that you say that, right? I see that now a lot with people trying to do hybrid cloud. They end up, trying to make public and private cloud look like the same thing.
But then you're the lowest common denominator.
Exactly. Yeah. And the lowest, which is the lowest.
There's no way your on-prem
is going to be as efficient as public cloud.
That many services.
Exactly that.
Do you have 300 services on cloud? I mean, it's mental. Do you have do you have the number of people to support 300 services? Probably not.
I have.
But then you might not need all those services, to be fair.
I mean, when you're on...
You only need 3.
When you're on public
cloud... Maybe it's manageable.
When you're on...
Just database and object store. Done.
When you're on, private cloud, you don't really have services. You have people. You have Richard as a service, or Peter as a service, or John as a service. It's not.
But it's I guess this is what I'm trying to work out, just because I think it's interesting to figure out, because like you're saying, people are the gateway for recognition of cloud, or products can be the gateway for the recognition of cloud. And if there's a risk where, unless you're watching the spend closely, you could easily sink a huge amount of money, right, which we see all the time, on delivering to the cloud, like obscene amounts, like in the tens of millions, really. if not sometimes hundreds of millions over the years, isn't it? For large enterprises.
We have been there, seen that. Yeah.
So, it doesn't seem like the most cost effective way to go about something, but it seems to be quite a common approach.
Yeah.
And I guess how does a business watch out for that, so that what are the parameters to put in place to kind of help you not fall into that trap where suddenly it's like, well, it started off just being 500k and now it's 50 mil.
I think and this is it relates back to building anything, right? If you're building something and it's not your domain, it's not your business domain, like that's not what you're trying to specialize in as a business domain, then you're not going to do it efficiently, and the cost to you to operate that thing that you're building is going to be higher than taking it from someone that does build those things. So let's say even like a really fancy meal, right? You're not gonna build a whole kitchen just to have a fancy meal. You just want your fancy meal, so you might go and get it from a restaurant. So there's a service that a restaurant is providing you to give you your fancy meal. You don't have to build everything around that, the operating cost for your kitchen, the installation, all of that, just to get your meal.
No, and most people have a kitchen though, I suppose.
Well,
most people would have a kitchen.
But we're starting from basic levels here, right? So you don't have a house, you don't have a kitchen, you're just trying to eat.
Yeah, I suppose. Okay, I guess though, it's a bit like I was about to say, I profess myself to be quite a good cook. I'm just putting that out there. As maybe other people might profess themselves to be really good at certain other things. Am I as good as a chef? Absolutely not. But do I like to think that I'm a good cook? Probably. Right? And I think that is the illusion. Like you might think to yourself, after 4 hours and you're then halfway through, and you're like, oh my God, literally chopping these vegetables. Like it's a bit like there's so many things, because most of it's all labour. Because most of it's stuff. Then when you're in it, you're like, I just wish we went out to eat, actually. But my ego maybe got in the way a little bit, and the idea of it and the thought of it was like, yeah, I'm going to cook this amazing meal. It's going to be fantastic.
And you probably only think of what it takes to get that meal. You don't think of the energy, the cleanup afterwards, like all of the things that you have to do around to give you the full experience.
I'm sold on the idea of eating it.
Yeah,
Do you know what I mean? Because I saw it on TV and it looked really good.
Exactly. Maybe a better example that's still associated with food might be pizza. Like not everyone has a pizza oven, and you're not going to buy a pizza oven just because you want to eat pizza
that day,
right? That day. So instead of having a kitchen, it's much better. So,
but I suppose in this instance, though, the cloud, they're not just doing. It's not a one-off. So it's like a continual thing. It's a continual investment they've made.
Yeah,
and so they do. There is an element where you could easily fall into the trap by accident of it. Just the team that needs to support the business that's making those decisions is now the team that needs to grow in line with the business to scale with the cloud. So it's almost like a one-to-one of like, okay, well, if the demand increases...
That's not scale though, right?
That's to scale with the demand, I'm saying. Not just...
Yeah, okay.
Right? Because the demand's gone up internally.
Yeah.
And now the team to meet that demand has to scale up.
Yeah.
And that's then not efficient because obviously you're scaling people in relation to the demand.
Exactly. But like... The definition, so that's growing in line with the business. That in that sense is, it makes sense. It's when it's human heavy.
You're scaling up though the team, presumably.
Yeah, scaling is used, I think, incorrectly most times.
I don't think in this case you're scaling up the team to meet the demand, like you would scale up anything to meet demand.
Yeah, but
presumably
or
growing, if you want to use that term,
because scale is when you have the same number of resources doing more.
Yeah,
right.
Well, that's economies of scale.
Yeah, I guess economies of scale is when you have proper economies of scale. You have the same number of resources
because you didn't need more people.
Yeah. But when you have just growth in a business isn't necessarily efficient, because you're now growing everything almost at the same level, which kind of implies that you're not doing it to meet the same scale or getting true economies of scale in that way. Does that make sense?
Kind of. I think they're different terms. I think like getting economies of scale is one thing. I think scaling, like application scale,
fair.
right?
Sure.
They scale up and they scale down. You don't say that's not scale, that's growing.
Yeah.
It is.
That's true.
Scaling.
Yeah.
And you can scale people too. Are you getting the economies of scale? No. I guess then that's the problem. So I think the business could be scaling the demand, as in like the increase of demand.
Sure.
The team has to underpin that demand. Is there economies of scale within how that team's set up so that it can basically not increase the cost,
the footprint of
that
team,
of that team to meet the demand like multiple times over? I'm not sure whether people even think about that at the beginning, because most of the time that team's quite detached to a point. They're just
from cost.
From cost or from like, it's I don't know. It's like kind of like an expected thing somehow. I think that's the thing, that people just seem to expect to spend a lot of money on those things. Maybe, I'm not sure. But it does seem weird that it's not like you'd want it to be lean and as cost efficient as possible.
It's funny because it sort of ties back to the very first episode when we were talking about how you're measuring teams and DevOps and all of that kind of stuff. Cost wasn't even a factor.
Cost is not a factor.
It's never a factor, is it?
No.
It's like,
how long does it take to recover? What's your change rate?
Exactly.
Like how fast? You know what I mean? How fast did you get to production? That's all you measured on.
Does it cost you?
Then you're doing it well.
Yeah, exactly.
Could cost you £8 billion pounds. Yeah. So long as those four things are there.
Crazy.
Yeah, it is a little bit crazy in that sense, because I guess that's at the engineering level of what you've implemented, as opposed to like how much it costs.
Well, if you're an engineer, then you're probably not thinking of it because it's a sunk cost. You are there, you've got a job, the business has
you're
a
not
cost,
there to worry about,
right? Exactly.
The cost, not your responsibility, is it? I guess
if you're an engineering manager, then you've got a bit more, but you might not have control of that budget. But if you're a head of department, you certainly do. But then they might be a bit detached from the outcome that's being like, and weighing that up. So my department cost me this much. This is how much they've achieved in this time, and how that is growing.
Well, it's actually different because we spoke about this before. There's usually three buckets. There's the cost of delivering it right now, like implementation cost. There's the maintenance cost, which might still require a lot of domain knowledge, depending on how complex the thing is. Right. So then you can't really have that team has to remain because they understand it the most. And then you have a support cost, which is like, and that could be the same team sometimes. Sometimes it could be a separate team, but it's a budget in itself.
Delivery, maintenance isn't maintenance.
It can be bundled together sometimes. I'm not saying it's always, but I mean, the cost of maintaining that thing might not be the same cost as the number of tickets coming in to support it.
Yeah, fair.
Upgrades, patching, that type of stuff. Maybe it's auto patching, maybe it's auto upgrading. I don't have a maintenance cost if it's all.
I kind of think of it as slightly separate. So like there's an initial cost, which could be like a build cost.
Yeah,
and then you have a cost to just support what you've built. And that is like the upgrades, patching, all of that kind of stuff of the software. But then presumably your thing has users. So now you have a kind of front-facing user cost to how, getting more demand. Because then you've got like, any one of those things could be more, could be cheap or expensive.
Yeah.
Like the build, you might put a lot of that upfront cost into build so that you are maintaining that run cost. Yeah,
exactly. So what you've ended up building could also be very expensive to maintain.
Yeah, exactly.
And could also be very complex to support.
To onboard your new users on and all of that kind of
stuff. Which may be worth it, based on where you were and what you managed to achieve. Yeah. But I think, nowadays, I'd say that there's probably more efficiency possible. Like the industry's moved on.
Oh, definitely. Without a shadow of a doubt. Yeah, exactly. There are just more efficient, cheaper ways to do things. Like we were saying earlier with, SSL certificates and
or like
you know,
Wix, I think, website hosting,
or even exactly. Just like there.
Do I need a web dev to host my? Maybe not. I've got Wix.
So many kind of commodity services, both in terms of product and like service that you get from places where it's just like, okay, yeah, it is cheaper for you to make me a pizza and I could buy it for £5 rather than me getting
all the stuff and the time and energy.
Exactly. Don't do it. Don't make your own pizzas, people. Like, go to Pizza Express.
Yeah, it's funny that it's a funny one because it's a tricky, because the things we were saying, it's a hard. I think the right thing, the answer has to be, you need to put the right like expectations and governance in place at the beginning, so that you're measuring stuff fairly on the offset. I don't. From my experience, that's quite an advanced way to think.
Yeah, exactly.
And you'd have to have gone on the journey probably already and really understood it to think in that way, to realise like the pitfalls that could happen.
I guess, you know, if you're, because nowadays everything is usage based, right? Like the common pricing strategy for most things is usage based, right? Cloud is usage based. I'm sure there might be an initial cost for you to like start having those conversations and do things commercially. But one thing that isn't really massively usage based is people. Like once you've hired those people, you have those people, right? You've now got a duty to those people and everything else. So like you could, you know, be a bit bold and try something, buy something that specializes in this space, and maybe it will meet your requirements, or you can feed into that thing to make it meet your requirements, rather than buying people to build from scratch to do something with that might maybe meet your requirements, but then you have a massive cost to maintain forever.
Because it's a tricky thing, because the cloud's a platform in itself.
Yeah.
However, it's got no real opinions, right? And there's loads of services, and to support lots of different businesses, they can't afford to have loads of different opinions. Yeah. So then you need to have opinions on those things inside of your business. And some of the businesses, if not most, can have roughly the same requirements. Like we kind of went through everything today. So in theory, the cloud vendors, because of the level of scale they're at, might not be able to make those decisions for you because they've got such a variety of sizes of businesses. However, there are sensible decisions that you can just make that'll just make your life easier, like we just kind of did on the previous podcasts. But then you also need someone to help recognize all of that value, which means then you need to hire somebody. And then you're not going to be sure, like, is there a vision or a strategy for this, right? So it's like, because at the moment the vision's cloud.
It probably just stops though, right? So like you deliver on that vision once and it's not like...
Yeah, but that's it. They might not need of it. Might not feel that they need a vision for the delivery of cloud.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like, well, I didn't know it. Like, I've gone to the cloud. We've got apps, cloud. Just
smush.
People will just come in and make this work. Join these two things together, so that I can get what I want. Which is like significantly higher. And then it's like, well, you know, a bit like a builder. This is quite complicated. I'm not sure. Like looking around, making notes. This wall will need to come down. And you ask for this, and then you're like, oh my god, this is really like way more than I thought it was going to be.
Exactly. Yeah.
So it is difficult, I think, but there definitely are, I think you're right, there definitely are much more alternative routes than always having to scale people in relation to it nowadays. And I think the buying thing has been a paradigm forever, for like literally forever.
Like people used to, you know, even build like PCI and all of those things, right? That used to be, and still is to a certain degree, massive, but now you can just outsource your payment information to a service and then you don't have to deal with that headache. Like now it's just paid for PayPal. That's exactly what exists. So
well pay and all the other ones.
Exactly. So it's just like it feels like we've, you know, in our thinking evolved a little bit to know that there are services out there that deliver a really fixed solution to something that you can just go and use, and it's more efficient to use it in that way because it's usage based than having to build it yourself. Once you've built something, you've just got to maintain it, and then the risk of not maintaining it properly and not, meeting kind of user needs constantly is just so high. It's just like it's so high.
And
I don't
to keep on top
understand.
of the industry, the way that it moves,
exactly,
is like that team needs to be R&D in, right? Working out ahead of all the other teams, like how much more efficient ways of delivering with the way you've implemented. Plus now managing, maintaining, and supporting
user research,
what you've just done,
product management,
because
R&D.
Essentially, it's an internal product, isn't it?
Totally,
in some degree,
definitely.
Or internal services wrapped with lots of weird custom things, trying to be a product, but isn't necessarily seen to be a product. So you end up in the kind of common platform teams, but then they're not necessarily proper platforms all the time. They're like kind of just strung together, maybe ways, like basically stringing together bits of automation around other things.
It's who they're built by. And, I guess I've got a little bit of a biased opinion.
I suppose
because it's kind of where we've come from, right? Like, and I am that role as well. I have been in the past where DevOpsy type people, they come in and we are used to stringing things together.
Well, solving problems.
Totally.
You come in to solve a problem.
100%. We're solving
and you see the problem.
Yeah.
You use your knowledge. You look at the industry and you solve the problem.
Exactly.
And that's what you do.
Yeah, you're solving the problem. But the way that you're solving the problem is normally by putting things together. I.e., other people have solved problems, and you're going to solve the overall problem for the business by putting all of those things together. Now there are and that might some evolve, but those things that you have to put together, there's now solutions that make it really efficient, where they've solved it. Like take GitHub or GitLab as an example. Source version management used to be completely separate from CI and CD. Now together, simplified a lot of things. You don't have to combine those things, and that's now
buy yet another product.
Yet another product for someone to go and string together to solve a business problem. It's just buy a thing because it solves it all. So just like that, there are, like, operating in cloud, there are definitely things that you can buy that have those things bundled together that you can just get the outcome really quickly.
But also, because we've just roamed back a bit, the people that come in to solve those problems, they're looking at each problem as it surfaces a lot of the time, right? And to have stepped back and then thought through where you're probably going to end up ahead of time, and then come up with a vision to protect the business so it is going to be more cost effective and it is going to be secure. And it will be able to give me economies of scale with a team, or whatever is important from a business objective. And it could be like a plethora of different things, but very, very rarely happens in a team like that, because they're being more reactive to the decisions made somewhere else, and then are dealing with the problems as they're servicing, and then making tactically strategic decisions to a degree, like, and then kind of just iterating along with the iterations that they're surrounded by, using industry tools that they're surrounded by. And so there isn't necessarily a vision, it's just a way of working.
Exactly.
And that can be really, it could be really inefficient. Could be really expensive. Could be really insecure. Like, there are principles that try and prevent it, obviously, like we mentioned. But unless you've thought about what you want from the teams that are going to enable you, then you'll just end up, that's just exactly what will happen, because it's designed that way, and it's no one's fault, because that's the ask.
Started, right?
It's just how you begin on the journey. That's what you start with, and you get someone in, and then they'll be like, actually, can you also help with the hiring for someone else? And then they go and get someone they used to work with, maybe, or whatever kind of goes on. And then fast forward a few years, you then like,
do people even like, because like you were saying, it's kind of, you build a team, and sometimes you build a team by accident to solve a problem that you didn't think that you would be trying to solve. And to solve those problems well, like you kind of touched on there, you have to have a lot of different skill sets. And constantly be doing the, like, user research, product management,
industry knowledge,
industry
where
knowledge,
the market's going,
everything all the time. And
that costs
it's
that
huge.
huge.
It's a huge
And
cost. And the time taken,
the time and the ability inside, like, to retain that person that can do that is probably highly unlikely.
God, in this environment,
because it'd be worth a fortune. If they can navigate a business to some really good place.
Exactly.
So I think there's products and tools out there that's just been sensible about which ones drive the most value, or ROI. Basically, it's like, what's going to give me the return on investment here? Do I not need to scale up the team as much? Can I move just as quick because it's already done? Like, there's a load of work. There's no one product that solves all problems, of course, obviously. So you have to look at each thing you're trying to do slightly independently, and then doing a bit of investigation to, like, is there already a leg up in this? Is what I'm doing going to actually meet demand and scale if I anticipate there to be? Is the way of working conducive for the scale that I might hit and the demand that I might hit? And those things you kind of have to look at before you go too far, because then you have to revise.
That's kind of like what the Cloud Center of Excellence, enterprise architecty type role is. Does it fit the business and its needs and its potential scaling with that requirement? With that thing, makes sense. But then in terms of like how it sort of evolves over time, how it's measured, we touched on it briefly in the last episode, but like security of the thing that you've built, that's never something that necessarily gets baselined and then constantly sort of measured upon, right?
I mean, assessed. I have a bit of beef with this, a little bit. Just because it annoys me. I'm gonna have to just say it. Security annoys me in the sense of
just security. Like,
well,
don't lock your doors. Security
it annoys me. It doesn't. Sorry, let me just rephrase. Security doesn't annoy me just generally. Lock all your doors. I'm coming for you.
Don't lock your doors.
No one can stop me. I think it being a post-event thing frustrates me. Right? Hey, I'm going to attach a thing that's going to tell me everything that everyone's done wrong, and to then not go and be like, well, clearly whatever it is you just delivered didn't work, right? So it's like, why were we pretending that it was all really good when it clearly wasn't? Because if it was really good, unless it's a security thing and everyone said you're just attaching it as a bit of an insurance policy, great, fine, makes sense, right? Check the things when they happen. Just that insurance policy, I need it. I need to know those things. I get it when it's used in that sense. But given some of the like Flexera reports and security being the biggest challenge, like the highest challenge, and then all like the market on these security products is definitely telling you that cloud delivery is not going well, right? It just isn't going well, right? Which then begs the question of like,
who's doing it?
How are we delivering it? Needs looking at, because clearly it's slightly flawed. There's no point pretending. Like, if the data wasn't there, fine. And if everyone's like putting in external products and they're like, yeah, good job, well done,
100%
secure, well done, no worries.
You
know full well that somebody, the security team is like, I don't have a Scooby-Doo. How many of this has happened? I like happened. Joe Blogs has left and so left.
Joe Blogs has left and
I know, there's always Joe Blogs. I know. I bet there is a Joe Blogs out there as well.
Damn my name.
Definitely change the name. There's going to look and be like, look, I have no idea whether we're in a secure position or not. We need to get something. Right, the risk is too high. Nobody can tell me the answers of how we've actually done security in the delivery. I've got no way of looking to see, like, there's like different, every time I speak to somebody and ask questions, it's really hard work to get the answers. And I've got lots of projects that have delivered. And herein lies the thing around bloody being scaling properly in a consistent way and making sure these requirements come in, because you can't wait until you've delivered and spent loads of money and then be like, oh, well, we're going to have to spend some more money.
We got to check this thing, exactly.
Yeah, we've got to check it all now. It's cost us loads, but and then we've got to try and somehow fix it, and even though how we're working isn't working to begin with. So it's like, so what are we fixing it with? Oh, just policy as code. What? That's not a fix.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you know what I mean? That's not a proper fix. It's a part of a fix, and it's a principle, it's a standard, it's not a solution. So it does get me a bit annoyed when people just don't call it out, and you're just like, clearly Can we just agree it's a problem? I'm not saying that everyone's doing a bad job or that it's really bad, and but there's clearly enough of a problem there for the reports and the data to tell us that there's a problem. I mean, it's just factual. I mean, so can we just need to have the right conversation to fix it, because it's clearly not working right. And that's what I'm trying to do, I suppose, with the questioning is it is a very tough problem to solve. And therein lies the issue. It's not like magical, there's your answer, but there are solutions and things trying to address it. And it's like, you don't have to solve it all.
There's multiple ways of solving it, right? Like just before we started, we were talking about how people are kind of getting to cloud and delivering applications, and people, if you're just like creating a website for your company, you don't have to build a website from scratch from code. You can use something like WordPress or Wix or something like that, right? So you're already
Squarespace, all those things.
Exactly. So you're already getting to cloud in some way, in a way that makes sense for the size and scale of your business. But kind of by accident, because you're just using a service, that service is on cloud, but you're doing it. So just like if you're trying to move to public cloud, really what you just want to do is figure out a way to deliver fast, like cost effective, securely, and with the right flexibility to allow your organization to move with its requirements over time. Right, then you're going to go to public cloud, but who's going to build it for you? How are you going to get there? What are you going to buy?
Exactly, that's the problem, isn't it? That's the problem, because there's like 50 different million ways to do it.
100%.
Some of them are quite common, but again, those things I think are fine, but they're tools. They're tools and people. It's a tool and people industry in that space, which means it doesn't have economies of scale for that reason. It's not designed for it. It was designed to solve a problem for that persona. It wasn't designed to solve a business problem. Right? Those tools, fine. So it's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Those tools were designed to make that person's life easier that was delivering for the cloud. Totally different proposition. But then it's like, but actually, if I do want economies of scale with the people, then what are my answers? And I think that's another lens that you kind of have to question. And there are things out there. I know I don't want to bias the podcast too much or like reference lots of other companies for people, but I think the answer is, you should make sure you're really hitting on what's important to you in the business early. And then go and do the research.
You've got to find your way to the solution.
You've got to find your way to the solution,
Exactly.
And then you've got to also make sure that you set caps on some industry benchmarks. Like, what's the ratio we should be aiming for the delivery teams to this central team, if it is central, or if it's not central, what's the ratio of the number of people that can support the number of projects at once? What's sitting behind those people? What exists in the industry to set that up? How do I get the right behaviors of that team?
That's what I was just going to say.
That's downstream. Does this person have to keep communicating backwards and forwards between everybody? What happens when we're 3 years down the line? Am I going to have a big maintenance cost? What's the total cost of ownership of all that's being delivered? And I think they're all the right questions to ask early.
Exactly.
Because then you can make informed decisions on what you want to do. And it might be that spend loads of money on people.
And what if you've like scaled up your team to meet some demand, but then your business changes and you don't have to meet that same demand again? You still don't have to meet that demand, right? So are you allowed to like just remove people from your team?
Yeah,
how does that
what happens
work?
if it changes? And then you've got all that headache.
Exactly. That's like the cost of change is huge.
Flip side, isn't it? And then you might be that you're trapped because you're like, well,
exactly.
This system's supporting, like, we might not have grown anymore, but it's supporting, like,
I've now hired 10 people, and they're capable of supporting, I don't know, 1,000 apps or whatever.
Exactly.
Right? Like,
then you're like, well, now kind of have to pay these people anyway because of the cost of what's being delivered. So it's not commodity and it's not mainstream. It's not off the shelf.
Exactly.
I don't go to another company and just get like some additional, I don't know, VCPU tax. Right. It is like a tax on something because that's how they charge, but I get support. They own the technical risk.
Exactly that.
And delivery of it. Instead, I own it all now as a business. Every little thing that we've done, I now maintain and own. It's just nuts. It is. I think it was fine a fair few years ago when it wasn't as complicated, but I just feel like it's got this, what you've got to do now in the landscape to meet those needs of the things that we spoke about for the business means you have to really think about commoditization now. Whereas before, I don't feel like you had to as much because, hey, people didn't have loads of accounts.
But
do you know what I mean? Years ago, it's
exactly,
that wasn't even really a thing people would say. In which case, you kind of were sharing.
Yeah.
But also, there wasn't even really audit that much when we started. It wasn't even a service, properly. And when it was kind of in the account. And later on, it was out the account. And so it's like the cloud has progressed. Yeah, things have evolved massively to support the scale of the market overall.
And the opinions of the market overall.
Yeah.
Because that's the thing that has enabled, like, that's the reason that those services now exist. The opinions were that, hey, it's not good to have shared accounts. We need to go and, you need to have isolated accounts, right?
Yeah.
Great opinion, great standard to have. Shit, how do we do that thing?
Yeah.
How do we make those accounts?
Which people
exist?
did do,
yeah.
But it was really like automated manual. I think from memory.
Automated manual.
Yeah, as in like there's a level
mean?
of automation that can happen after you've done it all manually first.
Oh, right. I'm just.
Do you see what I mean?
But I'm going to run a script that does something.
Well, yeah. Versus buying a product.
Yeah.
Already automated,
yeah, exactly,
but there's nothing manual to do.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So, but when it's internal, it's like, right. Well, we're going to automate eventually.
Yeah.
But first of all, I need to write all this stuff.
Yeah.
Before we then can automate around all that stuff.
Test it.
And then test that it works. Yeah. Exactly. So it's like, is that it's not automated out the box.
Yeah, exactly that.
So, it's kind of manually automated. That's what I call it. It's a bit of a bad term. Bit of oxymoronic.
Northerns, they always make something
each
together.
other. Well, I have to do is just contradict myself the entire time. It's like say one thing but mean something completely different.
I'm an automatic manual type of person.
Exactly.
So exactly.
Things come very manually automated to me. It's like this is the way I work.
Brilliant. And go on.
So anyway, I guess we haven't really massively solved this problem. I don't think. I mean, we tried our best, but it's a complicated
thing. The TLDR, the things to look out for when kind of starting to own a domain is how much it's really going to cost you, how effective you're going to be, and how quickly you can be effective.
Yeah.
And trying to do that with a lens of the initial thing to solve the business problem, and then over the time that solution is going to be alive for.
Yeah. And if you do outsource those things because they do have the experience and you don't, then tell them to tell you, well, how long does it normally take you to do this repeatable thing that you always do?
Yeah.
Because it should be short if you're doing it all the time.
Yeah.
And if you're in this like, well, it depends. It's going to depend on your business. At the end of that, you just think, okay.
You're being sold.
Exactly. No, does it depend?
Yeah.
I mean, obviously there are, I think the art is to say, just give me your general purpose thing first.
Yeah, exactly.
And then we'll have a conversation about what's custom to us.
Yeah.
But at least then you can time box the commodity aspect of it to not fall into the trap of
understand what the success metrics are.
Yeah, exactly.
Really simple.
Then break it down and don't fall into it's going to cost us all this because we need unique things.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like they're the things that shouldn't they will cost, but you can deal with those things separately. But anyway,
100%.
Cool. Right. Well, bit of a ramble and obviously had a bit of a rant.
Yeah.
And loads of oxymoronic terms.
I think that's the most passionate we've seen the automatic manual Jon Shanks over here.
Jon Shanks, yeah. Cool. Well, stay tuned and we'll be back in our next episode. I'm not sure what we're going to talk about, but we'll come up with a topic and then share it. If you have any topics you want to hear us talk about or you disagree, obviously, again, feel free to reach out.
Great to speak to you again. Bye.
Bye.